Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Thank you once again for joining me for another week. I appreciate you taking the time out of your week to listen to the podcast. Now, before I get into it, just a quick favor to ask. Make sure you're subscribed on any podcast platform that you're listening to this on, and please share it around with one other friend who you think might get some value out of what we are doing here. By you subscribing and sharing it around, you will help me continue to grow this podcast. I'm so very grateful that we have seen the growth that this podcast has had over the last 18 months. It's been amazing. It's been phenomenal. The feedback, the comments, the messages. I am so very grateful for all of you. And I'd love to see this continue to grow. So I can only do that with your help. So please subscribe and share it with one other friend. Now, this week I was having a conversation with a client of mine, and we were talking about one of the things that they were struggling with was to get their training done when they scheduled it to do it. And what I mean by that is basically they would schedule their training days in. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday at a particular time. And then what would happen is that time would roll around and then they would think of something else that they needed to do. They would then go and put another priority in the place of going and doing that training, whether it be they had to go and do something for their business, or it was that something else had to be done, right? And what they found is all of a sudden 2 weeks had passed by and they hadn't even done a session. And then they went to do another session, and when they rocked up to their gym, the headphones weren't charged, and then they just turned around and they just went home. And it was just kind of this compounding effect, right? Where it had just gotten to a point where it felt like everything was too hard. They felt like they were unmotivated. They felt like they weren't getting anywhere with their training, even though they'd only missed out for 2 weeks. And they were in a spot where they just felt mentally stuck. They didn't know what to do. And we had a conversation around just that feeling and then where they were at and some actions that they could take in order to come out the other side. And when I spoke to them, I actually said to them, look, this is something that I've actually been guilty of, believe it or not. And sometimes I think people think like coaches and trainers, like we're constantly motivated to train. And the short answer is we're not. Like, it's, for me, one thing that I've worked out, obviously working with hundreds of people over the years and also taking a good, hard, like critical look at myself, like I'm not motivated to train more than I am motivated to train. But it has just become so ingrained in me that I just go and do it. And I enjoy it while I'm doing it, and I feel better for it after I do it. But to actually get started on it, sometimes it's hard for me to get started on it because I just don't feel like doing it. And this process of legitimizing other actions over the top of it is something that, for me, since I've shifted from having the gym, has actually gotten worse. And it's that feeling of I've got this time scheduled in to train, but I could actually use that to go and do this on the business, or I need to do this. If I do this now, then that's going to make things easier on me later on. And now sometimes things are urgent and they do have to take priority over training. I'm not doubting that at all. There is going to be instances in life where that just happens. Now, that doesn't matter whether it's something to do with the kids or it's something to do within running a business or your job. There is just going to be things where you're going to have a session scheduled in and something urgent comes up and it has to take priority over it. But a slippery slope that a lot of people tend to go down when it comes to training is, number one, I think they're focusing on the wrong things, right? Like they're looking for that external motivation in order to get them to train. And that's another conversation that I'm not going to dive down the rabbit hole today on. But you got to stop focusing on the wrong things, right? Like you do have to, at some point, as gung ho as it feels, like you have to stop looking for external motivation and try and search for that intrinsic motivation as to why you want to do it. And you need to then put the big boy pants on, take some action, and like just go and do it yourself. Because for everybody, I won't say everybody, for the vast majority of people that I've coached over the years, once you start a session, the need for motivation goes away. And there are things we can do as a coach setting up the session where it's like, all we need to do is to get you moving. And once you are moving, the rest of it kind of flows on. That's again, another conversation, but stop looking for external motivation, because if you do that, then it's easy to legitimize putting a session on the back burner. It's easy to legitimize letting something else take the place of it. And this conversation I was having with my client was not around them. They weren't like then going and sitting on the couch instead of training, and they weren't doing like just medial tasks. Like they were doing productive things. It was whether they had to invoice for their business, whether they had to do study for university. And I asked the question, like, are you actually doing stuff instead of going to the gym? And they were like, yes, I am. So it wasn't that they were doing it. What they were doing is they were prioritizing other stuff over the top of it. And as I mentioned, sometimes things are just going to take priority. They are going to take precedence, and that's just going to be the way it is. But what they were finding was they were letting things take precedence and priority that weren't urgent, and when they actually thought about it, weren't more important than them going and spending some time for themselves and going to the gym. So what we spoke about was, when those feelings start to come up, we want to essentially ask ourselves two questions, or let's say three questions. Number one, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this? Okay, so if we're ranking the thing that we're taking we're prioritizing over going and training, how important is it on a scale of 1 to 10? And then for them, you have to work out at what point. So if it is over a 7, then it has to take priority. Like I need to do this thing instead of going to the gym. So, but you have to work out that scale yourself, right? For some people, it might be a 5. For some people, it might be a 7. For others, it might need to be a 9 or a 10 to actually take priority on it. That's going to be individual. So how important is this? And if it's below that metric you set for yourself, so let's say you say anything under a 7 or under, I'm going to the gym. If it's under a 7, you just need to go. Like you need to go and do it, right? And this is where it's like, don't look for motivation. Don't look for a sign that you need to go and do it. You just need to go and do it. And you need to be real about what it is when you set that scale, because it's hard to fool ourselves. It's easy to fool ourselves into thinking that something is more important than it actually is. And if it's like on that borderline and you're not sure, then you need to kind of delve into a little bit of a deeper questioning. And the second question that we spoke about is doing this now and missing the gym going to make my life easier later on? And again, when you ask these questions, it is really about being real with yourself and the circumstances that you're in. Because a lot of the times, and this is me speaking from experience with this, and the part B to that is there going to be any advantage to me, big advantage to me, on doing this task now instead of the gym? And when I ask if things are on the borderline and I'm not quite sure, when I generally ask myself those two questions, the answer is generally no. As in, there's no advantage on me doing that task right now and missing out on doing the session that I had scheduled. And the other part is, I do have time to do it later on, but what I'm actually doing is I'm creating this avoidance strategy around going and doing something that's going to make me feel a little bit uncomfortable, like going to the gym and going to training. By legitimizing the fact that I'm being productive in another area of my life, I am putting off doing something that I know is going to be beneficial for me. And I do want to do, like I've made the decision that this is something that I want to do, but I'm trying to avoid it because it's potentially a little bit uncomfortable. I'm having a little bit of self-doubt around it. I may be looking for external motivation rather than just intrinsic motivation and relying on a little bit of discipline to do it. And we have this nature as human beings to really just like legitimize one productive behavior to forego doing another productive behavior. And this is the thing, this is a conversation that we had, because the reason this person jumped on the call with me rather than just packing it all in was they genuinely wanted to work out what was going on. Like they really wanted to be able to implement training. They made it, they knew it was important. So we were able to have this conversation and we were able to go, hey, look, like these are the things that are going on here. And again, sometimes there are going to be things that are going to take priority. I'm not dismissing that. Like it's not always going to be black and white, but by putting some parameters in place for yourself as to when I start thinking this way, how important is this task? Is it more important to me than going to the gym? And give yourself a scale. And it's like, this thing is a 5. It's not over a 7. All right. I just need to quiet the mind and I need to go and do it. And I know I'll feel better for it later. Okay. If it's a 7 and my benchmark's the 7 and it's about the same, can it be done later? Yes, it can be done later. Is there any advantage to me doing it now? Well, no, there's not. Then I've still got to go and do it. And let's say it is a 7. And I'll give you an example for myself. I struggle to do creative social media posts, right? Like it's something that I've always struggled with. And I know for me that if I do them in the morning, they're going to be better. They're going to come off better. It's one of the reasons why I record this podcast earlier in the morning. It's just for me, it works better to do that at that time. But it's important for me to do these social media posts, especially now, given that we run an online program. It's the one way I get information out there. And it's also another way that I bring clients in. So it's important for me to do it. And I have to do so. I don't have to, but I choose to do so many per week, right? And there's going to be some mornings where maybe I haven't done it and I need to do it on this particular day. And maybe I've got to push my training session back to later in the day, or maybe I've got to miss the training session for the day because I have to do some stuff for the business. And for me, like I know within myself that if I put posts together later on in the day, they're not going to be as good as if I do them in the morning. So then I've had to have a conversation about where I'm structuring my programming, how I'm doing my program, my training program, and how my life's organized, right? So I digress for a little bit. So what I'm trying to get to is sometimes there's going to be productive tasks that are going to need to overtake things. And for me, with the whole social media thing, what I actually had to look at was where I was having things structured. So because I was conflicting the best times for me to do things within my schedule, I just had to move some things around. So that's the next part to it. So for this particular client that I was talking to, once we kind of dove into it, what it was and what they were going through is they were putting in other productive tasks to avoid going to the gym. Now, the gym may not be that important for some people. For this person, it was. That's why we got on the call and that's why we were working through it. And some tools that they were given and some tools that I've used is 1 to 10, how important is this thing? And work out what the benchmark is for you. If it's over a particular level or it's under a particular level. So if it's under that level, you just have to go and you have to do it. Rely on discipline. Don't search for external motivation. If it's over, then you have to look at, can I do this task later? And how is it going to impact my life if I do it later? And then start to have a real and honest conversation with yourself. Am I using this to avoid doing this because it's a little bit uncomfortable? Because it is very much something that I think we are all guilty of. I've been guilty of putting things in the place of difficult things that you need to do as a way of avoiding that particular thing. And I think that it all comes down to focusing on the wrong things. I think once you understand why you want to undertake a particular task and a particular action, and then you understand its level of importance within your values, and this all ties back into a conversation that I have with a lot of clients, and I also have put out on the podcast, like understanding your hierarchy of values. Where do particular actions, habits, and behaviors rank on your individual set of values? Because training for some people while I think it's important for everybody, is going to rank higher on their particular set of values than what it will on others. So you need to understand that in order to have conversations like what we're talking about now, so you can understand yourself and know, hey, this task, even though it is a productive task, I'm just prioritizing it over the top of this because this is uncomfortable. And that's where it all comes down to self-understanding, self-knowledge, and knowing the direction you want to take yourself, because then you can have those conversations. So let me know if it's something that you're guilty of in the past, where even though we are doing something productive, we're putting it in front of something else because it's uncomfortable. I see it all the time with people with training. I've done it with my own training. This is not a dig at anybody. This is just more, hopefully, giving you some tools and some questions you can ask yourself if you feel that coming up and you feel like you're not getting in or you don't have the time, because this can all tie back into feeling like I don't have the time to train. Maybe you do have the time to train. Maybe we just need to understand our own value system and where everything sits in there. And maybe we're just letting other tasks, albeit they may be productive tasks, take priority over something that we feel we should be doing or we feel that we want to do. So hopefully that helps. Let me know what you think. Let me know if it's something that you've struggled with. Make sure you are on the social media platforms. So the Unstoppable Dad Project on Facebook and at the Unstoppable Dad on Instagram. I will be releasing details of a new program that I will be launching in a few weeks this week. So it is our 30-day to Unstoppable program. It is a little bit of a different program and a different take to what I have done in the past. It is a bit of a short-term push that is going to be we will taper off into long-term sustainable habits at the end. So stay tuned for that. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.